Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for hopping on early. We won't be able to see or hear you, but you should be able to hear my voice and Kelly's voice as we get started. We're going to give folks a couple minutes to hop on and get started right at or shortly after 9 a.m. But thanks for being here. And we'll do some sort of tech orientation. There's a Q&A feature, there's a chat. So um, orient yourself. Good morning, Angela. Thanks for being on. Orient yourself to that, and we'll do a little bit more once we get the full group in. We have a decent number of folks registered, so it should be a good little crowd here. Promise I'll only do this a couple more times, but as more folks join, good morning, everyone. Thanks for hopping on a couple minutes early. We are going to start right after 9. So feel free to sit, relax. We'll get started in just a few minutes as folks join. Good morning, everyone. Excited to see so many folks hopping on. We are going to get started in just a minute or two. I want to make sure folks have a chance to log in. Thanks for being here with us on Teams. We're going to do a sort of housekeeping tech orientation, but the chat feature is available to you. You'll be muted and off video throughout, but we can see things that you chat and put in the Q&A, and we'll use that to answer your questions later on in the webinar. Kelly and I will be your hosts this morning, and we'll get started in just a minute as folks hop in and we get critical mass based on the number of folks that registered. So give it another minute. I never know if I should play music during these things or not. It's like I want it, but I don't know if it's just for my benefit or.
Sometimes it's helpful, but I think we've got a lot of excitement generated from today's conversation.
Agreed. Agreed. This is a good group. It's starting to build. I think we're getting towards
Mhm.
critical mass. I am going to
Yeah,
start sharing my screen, Kelly, and we can get
that sounds
started in
good.
just a minute.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for hopping on. Thank you so much for spending some time with us and you know, and actually we want to engage with you in the question and answer section and then put your questions in the Q&A, and there's also the chat feature. It is monitored, so we will hopefully attend to most of your questions as we go through the slides. If not, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A. So I want to welcome you all to our Michigan Central Station Children's Endowment Initiative webinar. This is our opportunity to do some Q&A, go over some um, big thoughts and really what this is, but also do some Q&A, also reassert that there's additional ways to reach us, as hopefully, if you're eligible, you are considering and have started your application, right? So I'm Kelly Britton, Vice President of Impact at the Children's Foundation, and co-facilitating this webinar with me is Brian Kilkelly, who is Vice President of Strategy, and I'll just toss it over to Brian.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, I saw a question in the chat. We will distribute a recording of this presentation. So you see there should be a little message up top that you are being recorded in this webinar. As Kelly said, I'm Vice President of Strategy. I'm super excited for this conversation. I want to do a little bit of sort of format and housekeeping for the tech part of this webinar, and then I'll toss it to Kelly to lead us through a lot of the content. But as you can see, there's a chat feature in Teams and then a Q&A. I think both are good. We have staff sort of monitoring both. Feel free to use whichever feels more comfortable for you. I would say if you have kind of very specific questions that you hope to get answered by Kelly or myself, Q&A is probably the best place to do that, but especially if it's related to the endowment initiative itself. What's nice about the Q&A feature is that other folks can see it, and Melissa, thanks for demonstrating here, that you could see it, and then if that question resonates with you, there's a little thumbs up feature that you can click to sort of say, yes, please answer this, and we'll get to that at a portion of the webinar after we do a little bit of presentation. We wanted to balance this out. The hope is to do sort of 40% of us talking and 60% of Q&A from you all. We'll see how that ratio sort of plays out in reality, but that was the goal here. So you'll see a few slides from us, and then a lot of time dedicated to both frequently asked questions that we've made answers to, and then questions directly from you all in this space. So excited for all of that. The other thing about this that I want to make sure folks are aware of is that you are always able to reach out to us, and there'll be a section at the very end of this presentation for sort of who to contact when. I appreciate you jumping on this webinar. I know there's lots of folks that maybe couldn't make this work for the schedule, so we will post the recording, as I already said, but this is not your only chance to engage with us. So if we do end up running out of time, because we're going to try to keep to the schedule and end right at 10 o'clock, just for everyone's schedule purposes. If you don't feel like you got your questions answered, lots of different ways to get in touch with us, which we'll talk through. With that, I'm excited to give Kelly the floor to talk through this initiative.
Thank you. Next slide. So really what began as the Michigan Central Station Children's Endowment Campaign with a very auspicious goal. It's a public and private philanthropic endeavor to raise $10 million to award and seed endowments, either establish or start endowments among 10 youth-serving organizations, culminated in there was an op-ed published last week where it was announced that over $19 million was raised. And the initiative is actually the boots on the ground efforts related to the over $19 million raised. So it is really a collaborative effort, and we are hoping to see the future of 10 youth-serving organizations within the 15-mile radius of Michigan Central Station. So what will selected organizations receive? They'll be seated with, or also, again, we're not saying that you can't already have an endowment. That's fine. But organizations will receive $500,000 endowment established at the Children's Foundation with an opportunity in 2 years with technical assistance from us and others to match that with $500 in matching funds that will unlock an additional $1 million. In that 2 years, we'll have tons of local and national technical assistance because we understand that in this area of southeastern Michigan and really nationally, community-based organizations aren't afforded the opportunity to establish meaningful endowments. There will be some individual assistance, some collaborative learning, some philanthropic sector support, and organizational development services, all tailored to the organizations. What you'll see in the application, phase one application, it's very direct. It's more about the organization. If your organization is selected to move to phase two, because this is a two-phase application process, then there will be more in-depth questions in phase two. We are operating a transparent, equity driven process early in May. We had an open call for selection committee members, and we have found and seated our 15 members, 15 plus, because actually there's a youth engagement component. So youth will be represented and meet and review applications just as our larger committee. And then those recommendations for phase one and phase two will be vetted, and then decisions will be made. So, really, overall, we are really trying to ensure that some of Detroit's finest, strongest, durable, and some that may be not as durable, but that with the proper support can have an opportunity for more equitable and financially solid footing and empower them to determine their future. Next slide. So, really, what does success look like? So, again, this is a 2-year process. Will be done by the end of December in the selection of the 10 youth serving organizations. But the commitment for those 10 youth serving organizations doesn't end there because they get 2 years to raise that matching $500,000. So what we're hoping by January 2027, which seems like a long time away, but it really isn't, is that the 10 youth serving organizations within that will be either seeded or have endowments grown at the Children's Foundation. And through collaborative coaching and support, these leaders will have access to new and vast networks locally as well as nationally. We will have demonstrated that in Detroit, in the Detroit area, we hope and do better things. We also will have shared learning with the organizations that we will also provide wide scale. So we're hoping to share the learnings not only among the 10, but others in this area that are interested in endowments and organizational buttressing. We are also looking at this as a successful national model of what public and private partnerships look like to establish equity among community-based organizations. And all of this, why are for our future, our kids in the Detroit area. Next slide. Tossing it over to you, Brian.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelly. So want to go through quickly the eligibility criteria. This is all, as Kelly said, posted on our website, and you can look at this obviously on the slides in front of you, but then also dive a little deeper into it on the web. But this initiative is really designed for and intended to impact 501c3 nonprofit organizations that are located here in Michigan. We also are making this geographically bound to that 15-mile radius around Michigan Central Station, and youth serving organizations headquarters need to be within that 15-mile radius. We also are hoping, because this is a endowment initiative, and really when you're speaking about endowments, you're talking about perpetuity and using the language of forever. We also hope that the organizations that are applying for this have some track record of serving youth within that 15-mile radius. So we're asking for organizations to have been in existence for 5 or more years. And then the philanthropic revenue threshold. This is annual fundraising from private sources, and we'll talk through this in more detail on a later slide, between 400,000 and 5.5 million. The way we're calculating this, and you'll see it sort of written out later, is an average based on your 990 forms, an average over the 2 years. So we're going to ask you to submit 2 years of 990 documentation, and then we're going to look at private sector fundraising that you do, and then take that average over the 2 years. So we really wanted to make this where it wasn't sort of just one snapshot of 1 year, but really trying to get a sense of over the last 2 years or the 2 years that you'll submit of the 990, what that average philanthropic revenue, so non-governmental sources, not sources of public dollars, so government grants at any level of government, but really thinking about individuals that donate to your organization, corporations that donate to your organization, private foundations that donate to your organization, that type of revenue. And we'll talk through sort of where to find that in your 990 if you're curious about how we're thinking about calculating that. I also wanted to put up here information for regional and national organizations. We know that there are many national nonprofits that have local affiliates within the 15-mile radius, and we appreciate the work that they do. We also are trying to balance out this being a local initiative for local nonprofits sort of headquartered within that 15-mile radius. And so and as much as regional and national organizations are interested in applying, they certainly are we're more than willing to talk with you all as you go through this process and see if you're eligible for it. But we really want to give preference to those local affiliates that have an EIN separate from their larger organization and an independent board of directors. And I think we can take those types of questions of am I eligible on kind of a case by case basis. So we probably won't answer that if you put that in the chat here today, because we want to make sure we're focusing on sort of the bigger picture things. But we'll talk through how to get in touch with us both by email and through more individualized office hours if you're interested in that and getting those questions answered. The one thing we would say is if you are a national organization that has a local headquarters within the 15-mile radius around Michigan Central Station, we would want to make sure that as you're submitting your application, should you be eligible based on the other criteria, that you're really only looking at local operations. And so we'll take that sort of as we need to outside of this webinar if you do have deeper questions about your individual organization. So please reach out and schedule time, email, office hours, whichever format is best for you. A couple other definitions that we want to make sure we're sharing with you all today on this webinar. So youth serving organization, for us, that means that you're providing services and programmatic support to young people ages 0 to 24, and that it is a majority of the work that you do. So as you see, if you clicked into the application at any point, there's an eligibility screen as the first 4 questions that you answer. And one of the questions is 55% of your programming dedicated to serving youth ages 0 to 24. We tried to make that as sort of broad as possible. 0 to 24 is a large age range, and we understand that. But we also know that the needs of young people and what are being classified as emerging adults, that sort of 18 to 24, it really is still a deep need in our community, and we want to make sure that we're not narrowing the funnel unnecessarily for good organizations that are serving young people in our community. So we tried to make it kind of as broad as possible on the age front, but then also on the programmatic front. So you see here a non-exhaustive list of types of services that folks could provide. So if you're serving young people and working with young people, we want you to consider this. And throughout, what you'll hear Kelly and I say, and any member of our staff, is we don't want people to self-select out of this application process. We want to make sure that, again, provided you're eligible, that you could see yourself in this, and that you don't skip applying just because you didn't think it was something that was for you. We think this could be for a lot of different organizations, and we would love to see, if you're eligible, as many people throw their hat in the ring. And we designed the application process to be relatively easy administratively to submit as this first phase. And then philanthropic revenue, we started to talk through that on the last slide, but just a little bit more of our definition here. So private entities, individuals, corporations, foundations, planned giving, fundraising events. Really what we're trying to make sure you're not including are government grants, other public entities that are providing those types of grants. And the rationale behind that is government grants are a great source of funding. I've worked at nonprofits over my career that received both state and local, as well as federal dollars. What we also know as professionals who have worked in the sector, and I'm sure it resonates with lots of you on the call, is those grants, while great and help to fuel your mission and the services you provide to youth, often are not very flexible and often don't allow you to uh, go after the operations in the way that you might if that funding was a little bit more flexible. And so what we're trying to do is really get a sense of, even if you're a large organization that relies on large grants from public and other governmental sources, or you have lots of program service revenue, which we know is another great revenue stream. We know that you're also buttressing your fundraising with private sector support. And oftentimes that private sector support, while being some of the most flexible, is often some of the hardest to generate. And so what would it look like for 10 youth serving organizations in our community to have a reliable stream of revenue year in and year out that's generated from this endowment to allow them to use flexibly as they see fit? It's your money. You're doing it with it what you think your organization needs to have the biggest impact on kids in our community. So that's the sort of overarching point here and why we're focused really on philanthropic revenue. We thought it would allow us to do more of an apples to apples comparison across different organization types, where many large service nonprofits do lots of earned revenue streams for services they provide, but often doesn't cover the full cost of those programs. And so they fundraise to backfill the rest. So we wanted to look at philanthropic revenue as a discrete stream of revenue for your organization. I'm monitoring the chat. There's nothing pressing there, and then I see the Q&A, so we'll get to that as we go to that section later on. I'm going to toss it back to Kelly here.
Great. Next slide.
This is just the not
Oh,
eligible entities.
yep,
Yeah.
not eligible. So any questions regarding that? I think that's pretty clear.
Yep.
Yeah. And in phase one, these are required documents. So in the chat, I'll just kind of dive in a little bit here in the chat, like Brian, and also Brian said that we're asking for 2 years of 990s, your 2022 and your 2023, or your 2021 and your 2022. We are doing an average to come up with the philanthropic revenue threshold. And then here's a PDF. On the website, you can pull the PDF of the application, and then also there's more information on the eligibility criteria and such on our website. Next slide. So let's dive into the frequently asked questions, and these are the questions that we've curated based upon office hours and conversations that we've had. So next slide. Let's talk about the radius. Yep. Frequently folks are asking, my organization is a Michigan-based nonprofit that serves people within, right, the 15-mile radius, but the headquarters is outside of the radius. Unfortunately, for this initiative, the headquarters has to be within that 15-mile radius. And we are using your IRS 990, your IRS tax determination letter as the uh, document of source document for where your headquarters is. So again, unfortunately, if your headquarters is outside of the 15-mile radius, your organization is not eligible for this particular initiative. On the website, there's the same map here that actually shows where 15 miles is from Michigan Central Station, which is our base point for this initiative. And you can see 15 miles goes really far out west, goes far to some of the southern suburbs in Oakland County, and it goes to some of the southern suburbs in Macomb County as well. Um, the other thing that I wanted to just touch base here, which relates to the question in the chat regarding if you have how do you report the ALICE information if you have an organization that serves, has multiple locations? Good thing about that question is the first thing is a yes and no, and then there's a text box after that where you can expound on that particular question. What I would say is that in that reporting that Alice, only report the Alice information for your youth within the 15-mile radius. Okay. So if you're serving kids not only in the 15-mile radius, but outside of that, you can just include the ones that are in the 15-mile radius. At times, you may not be able to drill down to just within that radius. It's fine to report the aggregate information that you have for the county. That's fine as well. Use that text box to expound more when it comes to that Alice information. Let me know if that answers your question in the Q&A. Just let me know if I hit that point for you. Next slide. So, and I think Brian has really done a great job of doing some explaining of what is philanthropic revenue. This slide lets you know, again, where are we looking at that information. And um, so what we're looking at specifically, we're looking at Form 990. We are going to look at Part 8, Statement of Revenue, line 1F. And what we're doing is we're taking the average of those 2 years that you submit, and that 2 years of revenue on line 1F must fall in the average range, in the range of 400,000 to 5.5 million. And I think Brian also said, one of the reasons why we're looking at 2 years, we know that one of those years, it could, in 2021, there may have been some large gifts because of COVID, or maybe not. And so we really do want to appreciate and understand, um, you know, what organizations have gone through in these last 2 years. Again, we offer an additional place in the application where you can offer additional clarification regarding those figures. So use the open text question that how does an endowment fit into your plan of financial stability to provide any insight on your 990s as the selection committee does its review. Let us know if we've answered that particular question for you. So also Melissa asked if you have an initial gift that was invested. Um, if that's reported on line 1F, that should be okay. But again, we're just looking at that line 1F in terms of your philanthropic revenue as reported on your 990.
Yeah, and
Okay,
just to double
go
click
ahead.
down on that, Kelly, the
Yeah.
investment gains typically would not be reported on that line 1F. And so but happy, Melissa, to talk offline if there's specific questions you have about your own financial reporting. But typically that wouldn't be included in that line on your 990. There's a separate section where you would report investment gains as part of your overall financial picture. So in most cases, it would not be included. But again, we can try to drill down individually for that for you if you need to.
And yes, Amy, to clarify, the average of 2 years of line 1F should be at 400,000 or above or up to 5.5 million. So not above 5.5 million and not below 400,000 for the average 2 years of your line 1F. Okay, let me know if I got that, if I answered that, so we're clear. Okay, next slide. So how will submissions be assessed? So on the on our website actually, and on the application, there at the last page of the PDF is the rubric. And so the selection committee will be using that rubric as a part of how every application is scored. And if you've checked our website, we have really good representation from just about every area the radius the initiative touches. The other thing with that is that they'll use that to then make those decisions. There will be some consensus decision making in terms of the organizations that will be chosen to move to phase two. Um, the Amy, your question about transparency and will we share the scores? I think we could probably share the median scores or the scores of the ones that get advanced to phase two. Unfortunately, the phase two application won't be open for folks to view. And so I think we can share um, the scores of those going forward. But I also want to hit on the fact that the selection committee will be using a consensus process. So really this is not solely about the score, right? We are taking a look at and want to have created a robust mixture of organizations doing a multitude of things to serve youth in the Detroit area. The other thing, we also want to have a mix of organizations that are at the $400,000 level and some that are higher. So to say that they'll all be all similar or not, we can't really say because again, the selection committee process and the the ways that we're going about this is different than using a numbers in, numbers out. Um, once we get into the process, I hope to be able to kind of explain it a little bit better than that. Um, but if any of you have experience making decisions in a consensus manner, then you understand that often there are maybe organizations or individuals or ideas that bubble up in the consensus discussion. And so we're open to the selection committee really guiding those decisions. The other thing that has come up is within the application process, there really is no right or wrong thing. This is not a grant, right? This is an endowment. This is really about the organization. So in the application, there are really only about 4 questions that are scored in the narrative component. And maybe that's actually only 3. There's 3. And that those narrative questions each have a 500 word limit. The narrative questions are: how has your organization enhanced the lives of youth? How do you measure the success of organizations' programs? And what are 2 to 5 measurable outcomes achieved over the last 2 to 3 years? And if you look at the rubric, and I'm taking a look at it now, you can see the scoring. You can see that excellent will be evaluated on how you clearly articulate that with examples and such. And so we really want you to use that area to your full advantage in helping us to learn more about your organization. Your rubric is a key thing in understanding how the application will be scored. As you go through the rest of the rubric, much of the other information is objective, right? So there's no way to cut corners on um, how does your organization identify yourself? Does your organization, would 51% or more of your organization staff identify as Black, Indigenous, Native, and or person of color, and such. So it's really more objective than subjective in that area. And next slide. Let's see. If a regional or national affiliate can apply How does that work if their headquarters? So if your headquarters is not in the 15-mile radius, you are not eligible to apply. If you're a regional or national affiliate that does not have a headquarters in the 15-mile radius, you are not eligible to apply.
Yep. And that's why I think you saw the language on the slide, Melissa, around preference given to local affiliates that have EIN separate from a larger national organization. So uh, if you want more clarification for your particular organization, I'm happy to look at any documentation with you in an office hours appointment or anyone for that matter. And we'll talk through how to schedule those, or feel free to email them. There'll be an email address coming up here, and we'll triage that with multiple staff members monitoring that inbox too. So I get that some of those get really specific to your organization. I don't want to bog down the rest of the application and selection process questions, trying to sort out eligibility criteria.
Okay, let's see. I'm gonna just hit Amanda's question. Yep. Just use the Alice percentage that appears in the tool based on the county input. That would be appropriate. Unless, in other grant applications, you've used more refined Alice data, then use that as well. But we're not asking you to be experts in getting that particular data, but we have the tool that you can use that is sufficient in completing the application. So other things that you can consider when applying is that, again, this is not a grant application. This is really about the strength and durability of your organization. And even to that point, you can look at the rubric and see the question regarding how does an endowment fit into the organizational plan for stability, you get 3 points, even if you're interested in developing a plan or articulating that you have an endowment plan. So there's nothing gain or loss. We understand that for many organizations, you've not had an opportunity to think about endowment. This is that chance. Maybe you've thought about it, but it's within the 5 or 10, 15-year goals of your organization. This is the opportunity now. Again, we're thinking about the organization as a whole. The phase one application is really about the organization as it is right here, right now. Those that are invited for the phase two application, there'll be different questions regarding endowment readiness and some other things that will be elevated as we make even um, tougher decisions in terms of what we are going to and how those organizations are going to benefit from not only the endowment, but also the technical assistance that comes with being a part of the initiative. I can't stress that much more in terms of the grants in 2020, the grant in 2025 and 2026 that the organizations will receive. There'll be local support for organizational structure support and growth, as well as endowment. Organizations that are invited to apply in phase two will be notified via the contact information that they share in the application. And on the website, we do have a timeline that really goes through, what that whole notification times and things like that on our website. And in December, organizations will be notified of whether or not they've been selected. So those that aren't selected to go from phase one to phase two will be notified. Phase Those that are invited to phase two will be notified, and then there will be an additional notification of whether or not you've been selected to receive the endowment or not as well, and that will be at the end of December. Let's see, regarding board of directors and their affiliations, we really just want their primary affiliation. Okay, so the primary affiliation would be, what is their title and what organization that they work for. Let's see. Um, and let's dive into some more of the attendee questions. What do we have in the chat that we've not covered?
I think there's a couple. They're not so much questions as they are comments, and I think they're good comments. And I just want to address some of them around the philanthropic minimum threshold. I think part of this is the structure of this particular initiative, and we had to lay the marker down somewhere. And I get the sentiment of if you can already raise at least $400,000 a year, you know, is this actually set up to provide support? And I think it is because it's an endowment and not a grant. And so when you think about endowments, even if every organization maxes out the matching, which again is raising an additional $500,000 on your own as an organization with support, but your organization will still have to raise $500,000, which would then get matched dollar for dollar. So you'd walk away, not away, but end the initiative with $1.5 million in your endowment. That's still going to spin off about $70,000 a year. So it's not that your organization has access to the full what they call the principal amount of the endowment. That amount stays and grows as the market returns help it to grow over time. So the spendable amount each year is $70,000 a year. We tried to lay the markers down at that 400K level, and we struggled with that a lot with the steering committee and other folks that helped us to design this initiative. It was really hard to think about the right threshold for this because at one point you want the organizations that truly need support on an annual basis to be eligible for this opportunity. But then it's also built and designed for organizations that are ready for endowment. And I think if you're able to raise from the private sector at least $400,000 a year, you're likely thinking about how do we actually set our fundraising up long term to benefit our organization, and that's where endowment can come in as a tool to strengthen your organization. If it's a maxim we've been using around here. Organizations don't have large endowments because they don't have any endowment at all because they haven't been able to spend the time and energy thinking about it. That would allow them to actually put aside money that they might need on an annual operating basis into a long-term sort of savings vehicle, if that makes sense. And so that's where that came from. That might not be a satisfying answer for folks in the chat, but that's the rationale and design behind the decision is we wanted organizations at a certain stage in their life cycle that already have some track record of success in fundraising, but are actually looking at diversifying their revenue streams in a certain way. And that's where endowment comes in as a way to think about the total capital stack that nonprofit organizations might need if they already have really good fundraising from particular revenue streams. Maybe they're thinking about what does endowment do for them as a reliable source of revenue on a yearly basis. And I think the only other thing I saw in the chat, Kelly, not in the Q&A section, is Rich G asked if orgs are allowed to partner for this opportunity. I don't know if you want to take that one or if you want me to.
I'll take it. One of the things in consideration of partnering, that really is a complicated aspect. So the answer is if I would say that this would be something that we would love to meet with you about to learn more. The issues at this point would be something legal and some other things that we would want to learn more about. This in particular is probably not an opportunity to partner, new partnerships, but if your organization, both organizations meet the eligibility requirement, let's schedule some time to talk. Brian, what else would you like to add to that?
No, that's exactly right. And I think it really is. I mean, we tried to lay out really clear eligibility criteria and tried to make it so that folks, even if it doesn't fit for them, they at least know sort of why and what the rationale was behind it. The partnerships piece really is case by case. And I think we'd want to understand the real sort of, as Kelly said, legal aspects of that and making sure that we truly understood um, Yeah, Rich, I think it would. Again, we'd want to think on a case by case basis with you and make some determinations based on the different orgs. And I don't know if this is the right venue to do that, but yeah, I think it'd be really trying to think about how would that work, what would the structure look like? Because when you're thinking about endowment, you're thinking about sending the spendable amount of that endowment to an organization each year, and if you're two organizations, sort of how does that work legally and who's entering into this endowment agreement, all of those sort of legal ramifications that I'm sure our lawyers would love to dig into. But I think we'd want to make sure we had as much information to share with them as possible.
I think again, one of the things I just want to hit on again, if this was a grant, then that question would be easier. But this
Yes.
is not a grant. This is an investment in the future of the organization. The organization that, of course, yes, runs programs, but the organization. So it's easy to award a grant to one and then someone is the subcontract of the other or is divvied up. Endowments are such much more, have a legal structure to them, have a has a board responsibility to them, has fundraising implications, um, and so it's a lot different than a grant. Um, you know what, Deborah? We are hoping that this is not the only time we get a chance to offer this opportunity. Um, but this is our pilot. This is our proof of concept that in this area, number one, that the monies needed to endow 10 organizations could be raised. That's an important part. But again, I want to stress that that's not the only thing that this initiative is about. The technical assistance and then us making sure that the organizations can continue to grow and escalate and be here forever is just as important as the endowment. Again, we are open sourcing all of the learning as we go through it. We truly invite all organizations to figure out how to get to the point where endowment is a part of your future. There's so many great resources in our area to begin thinking about board structure, fundraising, grant writing, and a whole bunch of other things to begin to have those conversations and really dream big. This is a huge opportunity for organizations in our sector, huge opportunity for the boards and leaderships of the selected organizations, but also as important, this is about the future of our kids. Um, at this time, are there any more questions? And then, Brian, did you have any closing words? I don't see anything else in the Q&A.
There's one that just got added. Would the matching
Okay.
$500,000 funds need to be added to the endowment, or just proof that we raised that? Yeah. So the match component is a enhancing the endowment. So as you saw, the sort of structure of it all is an initial allocation of $500,000, and then over the course of those 2 years, 2025 full calendar year and 2026 full calendar year, that's where the matching campaign happens. Um, Organizations that enter into this agreement will see really clearly sort of the schedule of matching. But Melissa, to answer your question, yes, those matching dollars, that 500,000 that each of the 10 organizations is being challenged to raise, would go into that endowment and then be matched dollar for dollar, so that the 1.5 million endowment is sort of the what we're targeting for each organization to have in their endowment at the end of those 2 years. So it's not just proof that you raise that; it's actually raising and with support raising those dollars to then go into your endowment, because we know that's a real challenge with endowments in general. It's one thing to set it up; it's one thing to seed it, and that's all great. But endowments of a small size can often be just a distraction if you're not able to actually use it to cover a meaningful portion of your operating expenses each year. And so we'd love for organizations to be able to raise those additional dollars over the 2 years and then put it into their endowment so that they see as much benefit as possible from this. The spendable, as I shared earlier, is going to be at 1.5 million. 4.5 or 5% of that is somewhere in the $70,000 range. Does that endow your CRM software? Does that endow a staff position that allows you to think about fundraising in a different way, and that you wake up every sort of beginning of your fiscal year and know that you have a reliable revenue stream of about $70,000 initially, to go through and make it so that you're able to sort of think about your sustainability in that way. The other thing that I don't think we shared on the slides here, but part of this 2-year engagement will also involve unrestricted general operating support so that organizational leadership can really think about this and have time and space to do this. So we know that asking you to raise another $500,000 over a 2-year period is a large ask for any organization of any size or fundraising acumen. So that's not lost on us. But to engage in the cohort-based learning and the technical assistance that Kelly outlined so well, we'd want to make sure that you also have general operating grants from the Children's Foundation to make sure that you're thinking about this and really can spend the time and energy on it. So that's all part of the technical assistance part of this, and we're really, really excited to do that with different organizations. I think the only one that I don't know if we answered, Kelly, is audited financial statements are not yet available. Would it be appropriate if it is completed prior to phase 2 selections? I think we want you to upload the documents you have now. I think we understand different fiscal years and timing of all of that. I think we'd want to know, yeah, exactly what Kelly said in there. Please submit the financial statements that are available, and then should you be moved into phase 2 and you have your most recent audited financials, we'd love to see those as well, if that's the timing that plays out there.
I think too, Brian hit on the question that Maria offered in terms of the part 8, line 1F. We do understand that this opportunity is really a specific opportunity, number one, for organizations that are Michigan based, right? Michigan based. Number two, have headquarters within the 15-mile radius. And number three, are at a sufficient level of maturity in their ways that they are raising monies in that philanthropic revenue category. We definitely understand that grants and other ways of raising money would go a long way for organizations. We do understand that. The Children's Foundation is a is a traditional grant making organization. So perhaps in working with us on the grant side of things, this may be an opportunity for partnership in those ways. So I'm just going to toss it over to Brian as we begin to kind of close out.
Yeah, and thank you all for all the great questions. I hope you feel like we've been responsive to the things that you put in the chat. If you do have additional questions, here's who to contact. I think in general, if you need sort of a question answered, you see the general questions here. There's an email inbox that members of our staff, including myself and Kelly, are triaging and responding as they come in. We're really trying to be as responsive as possible. So use that one. You should get a response relatively quickly. If you have technical questions about the online application, if something's not working the way you think it should, or just in general, feel free to reach out to me. That's my email on the screen there. There also are technical support emails for Submittable, the platform we're using to collect applications. So if you think it's submittable and not our problem, please reach out to them too. But you can start with me, and I'll try to answer things as I can. The other thing that's not listed on here but is on our website is, and we've had a ton of them, which have been really, really fruitful conversations with almost 50 organizations at this point, our office hours appointment. So if you go to our website, there's a link there that you can schedule an office hours appointment with myself or with Kelly. And we will work with you over a 30-minute conversation to answer specific questions you might have, and really talk through, what is this initiative, a lot of the same information we shared here, but then also really think through with you as an organization, how does this fit within your overall plan as an organization. So please schedule those office hours as needed. And then lastly, we will post this. So thank you for being here today. We're going to post the recording online. It'll have, the screen with the slides there. So you'll see the content on the screen as well as hear our voices as we go through this content together. Kelly, any final words before we start to close out?
No, thank you all for your time, your attention, your questions. Um, Please, we're interested in your feedback along the way, as we are learning and going through this whole process. And again, I just want to thank you for your time today.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. We'll close this out. Please follow up with us as you need. Appreciate you.